Alright guys, it's Chatterbox Reviews. Coming to you guys my throwback review for the pilot of Colony. Alright, so welcome back to this review series here on the channel where I take a look at pilots from TV shows that have already finished airing and ideally have been off the air for quite a few years. In this case, I believe it was 2018 when Colony was canceled, unfortunately, from USA Network there. But this pilot episode is from 2016 and I think it's January, so we're 8 years, a little bit more than 8 years since this pilot aired for the first time, which is insane. I still remember, even though I'll get into this, I didn't watch Colony yet. This is now the only episode I've seen of the whole series. At the time, I remember seeing Colony on, when I was watching shows like Suits and Zoo on CBS. I was really into at the time because I remember it was on, I think, in the summertime or maybe early spring, and that's kind of when Zoo came on. So I always saw Colony, and I always wanted to watch it. I'm not sure why I didn't, get into it at that time, but just so fascinating that it's been that long since then, and I remember that time so well. So yeah, as I've said now, I have not seen Colony. This is now the only episode I have checked out of the series. So with this review series, I've been doing obviously quite a few shows that I have seen. I've been doing the pilots of, but I have done the Fringe pilot as well before this, which is another show that I have not seen any episodes from prior to. So this will be in the kind of same vein as that one, where I just did the 100 pilot with my buddy Darren there. Thank you to him for joining me for that one. It was a really fun discussion. And obviously I have seen the 100, and it's one of my, it's up there for me in my terms of my favorite shows. So this will be a bit of a different look, obviously, because I don't know what happens next, right? I don't know, the future of the series and all that stuff. I'm not familiar with any of the criticism or anything like that with the show, and I know it was canceled. So I'm not privy to all the reasons for that cancellation, or maybe maybe the show got a lot worse in season 3 and some of the stuff I say for this pilot isn't going to make sense, anything like that. Please forgive me, this is the only episode I've seen, and so that's kind of, my approach to this one. But anyways, love to hear your guys' thoughts on Colony. I know it was canceled, so maybe, people aren't as willing to check it out these days. But if you did watch it then, or if you, watched it in the time since, love to hear your guys' thoughts on the series and, of course, this pilot episode as well. Yeah, love to discuss with you guys and talk about this one for sure. And if you enjoy this review, please leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel as well. Would really appreciate that. We're almost to 1,000 subscribers, so really cool that we're that close. So yeah, I really appreciate that for a subscribe there at this point. So anyways, so we'll get into this one then. I'll start off with kind of some of the general details and the synopsis of the series, and then we'll get into my 4 criteria that I do for all these reviews in the series, which is characters, the world, kind of world building, the hook or the twist, very important in a pilot episode, and, does this stand out within the genre that it is kind of in? Is it unique? Is it original? Does it make me want to watch the next episode, for example? And then I'll end off with a rating out of 10, just a good way to kind of compare all of these pilots that I've watched. And I guess the end goal is to finally find the best pilot ever made in TV history. Not sure if I'll ever get there because there's so many pilots, but anyways, that's kind of the end goal. So that's where we are, and that's why I'll give a rating as well. All right, so having said all that, let's get into some of the details then. So this was created, and the show was created, and this pilot episode is also written by Carlton Cuse and Ryan J. Condal. And so Ryan Condal's name is interesting because House of the Dragon is coming out in just a couple weeks, season 2, and of course he's the showrunner, well, I guess along with George R.R. Martin, being there as kind of a consultant in a way, and writer, I believe, as well. But Condell's kind of, the main guy who came, I'm assuming, to HBO and to Pride Martin with his proposal for a House of the Dragon spin-off series, and he's kind of the one behind that. So really fascinating, to see kind of his beginnings here. I think he wrote a couple other things, but I think this was kind of his main start, was the Colony TV series. And then obviously Carlton Cuse, kind of a decorated career, you would say, at this point, and even at the point of Colony, 8 years ago now, with his work on Lost. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he was like a showrunner, right, towards the later seasons of Lost, or at least played a huge role in Lost during its time. During its run. So obviously having a big name like that, and I think his production company is even, one of the main, he's a producer on the show, and so his production company played a big part in getting this greenlit and getting this made too. So obviously a big name there. Ryan Condal's name, not that big at this time, so I think the partnership there was something that, kind of worked and got this project going. So. And what was fascinating to me is this is an original idea, and I will get to that when I talk about the originality of this pilot, but that really impressed me because I really thought, even thinking back, like I said, years ago when I kind of was watching shows in this vein and was kind of looking at Colony, I thought for sure it would be based off a book or, something like that. But no, this is an original idea from Condal and Cuse. So really fascinating as well. So yeah, definitely them kind of the main brains behind this concept for sure. And then this pilot is directed by Juan Jose Campanella, and he went on to direct a few more episodes of this. And what else did he direct? I think the *Halt and Catch Fire* pilot as well, which I might be taking a look at in this review series as we go on here in the next little bit. Great show there as well. And so, yeah, I think maybe House he did a few episodes on too. I can't remember, but I don't really know him for much. I haven't seen much of his work. But he does direct this pilot, and then I think he directs like 9 episodes or something like that throughout the run of Colony. So he was definitely involved heavily there. All right, so then the cast for this one, we got Josh Holloway, of course, who's probably the big draw, his work in Lost. Obviously, having that Carlton Cuse connection there, I'm sure that played a part in his casting, perhaps. So yeah, obviously big to see Josh Holloway in a lead role like this, leading the show. And then you have Sarah Wayne Callies to kind of complete this duo here for the show. And of course, I know her best from The Walking Dead. I feel like that's, probably her biggest project going into this. And another reason why I really wanted to watch the show at the time, and I'm still not sure why I didn't, but yeah, obviously love her in The Walking Dead. I think she's one of the better actors in The Walking Dead in the early seasons there, and she's great in this pilot as well. Great to see her. Peter Jacobson as well is in this. Tori Kittles, who I really like. He was in that film Dragged Across Concrete, directed by S. Craig Zahler. Really enjoyed the film, and I thought he was really, really great in that film. And then he was also in... I guess he had a big role in Colony, right? He's in the show for all of the episodes, it looks like. But then he was also in True Detective Season 1, that's right. So he had that, he was kind of one of the interviewers, right, that was interviewing Rusty and Woody Harrelson's character as well. So, yeah, kind of interesting to see him there too. And then we had Amanda Righetti as the kind of rounding out the top 5 there in the cast. So, the synopsis for this pilot episode is basically, I think it's about a year out, or less than a year since basically aliens invaded the Earth, took over Los Angeles and basically occupied it, turned it into a occupation like zone, right? They literally resurrected walls around Los Angeles, the city. And have now, occupied, and I guess the whole thing that I'm assuming they're going to dive into with the series is this idea of collaborators and the resistance. And that whole thing, the humans that are collaborating with the aliens that are making all of this work and basically doing the dirty work, right? Doing their bidding, right, for them. And then the resistance, right? The citizenry kind of resisting back and even, forming groups and this kind of stuff to withstand it. So that's kind of the synopsis here. in this pilot episode, we don't see the aliens. They're called hosts, actually. I'm not even sure if the word alien is used once in this pilot episode, so they very much keep it to the hosts. I think that's what they call them. And so, yeah, so that's basically the premise here. And then, of course, our main character is, in the premise of this pilot episode, is then, captured in this one, and it's figured out that he's been hiding his identity. And so then, once they find out his true identity, they actually want him to work for them and help them fight the resistance movement. And then there's a bit of a twist, obviously, with Sarah Wayne Kelly's character, which kind of completes this kind of foil, right, between the husband and wife who have this family, and she's a resistance fighter, right? And so she's part of the resistance. So, going to be very much, I think, the two kind of, like I said, the foil, right, of the two sides of that coin there for that one going forward. So that's the premise of the pilot episode, kind of summed up here. All right, so then in terms of my criteria for the episode, let's get into a bit of an analysis here. So let's start off with the introduction of the characters. So this is, to me, kind of where I start off with a lot of these pilots, and a really important part to these pilot episodes and analyzing them and comparing them to each other. So for this one, I think we have two, maybe three. I think maybe three is a stretch, but definitely two. Obviously, the duo of Josh Holloway and Sarah Wayne Kelly's character. We have Will and Katie, right, the husband and wife here. Those are the two I think we'll focus on. Peter Jacobson's character, I might touch on a little bit, but mainly these two. So if we want to start off with Josh Holloway's character, Will, yeah, I wasn't sure about his character. I think Josh Holloway's fine in the role, but I think it's just there's not much to him in this episode. Obviously, kind of the reveal that he's been hiding his identity and that he is I forget even exactly what it is, but he is a soldier, right? He has experience with that. He fought in the Gulf War, I believe they said, or in Afghanistan, rather. So, yeah, obviously he has that combat experience, right? He's has that training, that military kind of side to him, and that's revealed, right? Because up until that point, we just kind of think he's a normal dad, right, with his family. He has kind of this normal job, and all that, and then we learn about his son, and so it's like, yeah, a dad would want to reunite with his son, and so he goes through this whole like plan that we see in the first few minutes of the episode, where he tries to get to the other side beyond the wall. Of course, it goes wrong with the explosion and all that, but I guess it kind of does twist that on its head, right? We get a little bit more to him. He's not just this normal dad. He does have this experience, and he's hiding something. But even then, I don't know. There just wasn't anything that really stood out to me, about that character, that beyond that kind of little reveal there. There's just not, I don't know, there just wasn't as much there. And the introduction of both of these characters, so we're talking like literally the physical introduction, like how we first meet them, not great to me in this episode. They're in the kitchen making breakfast for their kids. That's how we are introduced to both of them. And yeah, I mean, he's just kind of like joking with his kids, again, kind of that normal dad. And then the mom comes in. And she's kind of the normal mom, the way we're introduced to her in the scene. So, yeah, the introduction of the characters was not strong to me in this episode, though. Now, if we move to Sarah Wayne Kelly's character, yes, the physical introduction of her, the first time we meet her, is not that strong either, because I think it's just, again, like it's just a very cliche mom, right? That's at least what we see at that point. But I think she is a little more unique because her reveal, right? Both characters have a bit of a reveal here, but her reveal, I think, is even better because throughout the episode, they play it out like she is this normal mom. She's going on some errands on her bike, we see, and then it turns out she goes to get this insulin, right, from this trader, right? They start trading items at this point because of the occupation, because of the limitations on products such as insulin. And so she's trying to get this insulin, but then the twist is she pulls a gun out, right? She pulls a gun out on this woman where we think that she's just gonna kind of get got, right, if you will, and be screwed. And this woman's gonna take the bottle of is it whiskey, scotch, or something like that, or bourbon maybe, that she takes from her. But no, she pulls out this gun and kind of turns it around, right, on her. And that was a big reveal, though, right? Like, because that adds something where it's like, oh, she's not just this normal mom out running errands. She's carrying a gun on her. And especially in this world, because they've been occupied and because of limitations on guns, I think they even say in the scene that, if they find out that she's carrying a gun, all of them are gonna, be captured or something like that, and punished. So it's a huge thing to carry a gun and to even pull it out in this world, and she does that. And so that just adds a little bit more depth to her character, I think. And it's like, oh, maybe she's not this normal mom that she's acting like. So it's a bit of this facade that she's putting on. But Josh Holloway's character, I don't know. Like, yes, the reveal was there, but I wasn't shocked, right? Like, I wasn't shocked that he had military experience and that he was a little bit more than, what he was, maybe what we thought, right, from what we saw. But her reveal, I think, was just done better, right? It wasn't just exposition of a character telling us. It was seeing her pull this gun out and right away we're like, oh, wow, this is different, right? This is different than what we thought. So, I thought her character was a little more unique. But even then, for most of the episode, beyond that kind of sequence, we don't see much from her, right? She's very worried about Will being gone, and so that kind of takes up a lot of the time of the episode. So anyways, characters, not that strong. Peter Jacobson's character as well. He's playing Snyder, right? Who's kind of the guy who enlists, Will's, help, or gives him this job now to work for the host, work for the aliens, collaborate, right? Be a collaborator. And yeah, I thought his character was just good. I mean, he's just kind of like a, kind of a sly, opportunist. I think he even says it himself, that he's taking advantage of this opportunity. And that's very much, and I'll talk about this, but it's very much that moral question, which they're playing with a lot in this episode. And I'm sure that'll be the main focal point of the series. And he's very much on the side of, no, he's collaborating and he's just taking advantage of the opportunity. He's an opportunist, and that's really it. And so, yeah, but again, not much to his character, not much development there. I think he plays it really well, though. I think he does a really great job, playing it. And I think the casting is good, too. I think he just kind of looks the part. Maybe that's a little bit offensive, but he does, fit that character very well. And I think he plays it very well. It kind of plays it up. And so I think he does a good job there. And Tori Kittle's character, not much to him in this episode. So if I were to watch more episodes, I would really like to see more for him because, as I said, from the stuff I have seen him in, besides this, I think he's a great actor. So that's, all my thoughts then, on the characters here. Definitely a weaker point of this pilot. Okay, introduction of the world building here. Yeah, I think this is very strong in contrast to the characters. Very strong. I really like the way that this pilot, I really admire that. I think it's a really cool way, and other shows and movies do this, obviously, but it's a really great way to introduce us to this world. As we start the pilot episode, it seems like a very normal day, right? They're just making breakfast for their family in their house. And we even get this broadcast about it's a beautiful day in Los Angeles, right at the opening, opening scene. Everything seems normal, and then it's just kind of these, shots here and there that it's like, oh, that's weird. I think the son goes in to pick oranges from the backyard, and we see this. It looks like a prison fence, right? That's above, his backyard. On this fence is set up, and it's like, oh, that's kind of weird. But it's just these glimpses of this, right? And so we just kind of slowly are kind of easing in, and then we figure out, okay, there's something up here, right? Like something is not quite normal. This isn't quite our modern world. Something is up here. And then, of course, as the episode plays out, we get, we see the drones that are flying around. We see the wall, which is a big part. Even in the one scene, we see the ship, supposedly at least, that's what it is. The alien ship kind of boost and fly up into space. So we obviously see, as the episode plays out, we see more of that. But I really like the way that they did it, in that they didn't just start the episode with showing us the wall or something like this. They kind of slowly brought us into this, and we kind of figured out by ourselves after a few weird kind of moments, okay, this isn't quite like our world. Something is up here. And obviously, if you knew the premise, obviously the way it was advertised, you probably knew something was up going into this pilot. But someone like me that I didn't know much about it, just going in blind, I thought it was really fascinating the way they did that at the start of the episode. And I think everything looks good. I think the wall looks good. Talking about like CGI and effects use, I think the drones look pretty good. It is 2016. We're not in the early 2000s or anything, but I think everything looks good for the budget the USA Network probably gave them. Wouldn't have been a lot. And I think everything looks good. So yeah, really, I think the world building was really cool. And like I said, I like that they don't refer to them as aliens. They're very much thinking of them as like the hosts, right? And all this stuff. So we're already building kind of the lingo, right? And our kind of language for this world as well. And it's not just, all these aliens invaded, right? It is very much, and I think that's an advantage to where you start the show almost a year in to the occupation, right? And it's these people who have gotten used to it and like I said, kind of have this language to talk about what has happened. So yeah, I think that was fascinating. So I really, really positive on the world building here. I thought that was a good aspect to this pilot. Okay, so the hook or the twist, and to me, this is probably the most important element out of any of these analysis points to me of a pilot episode, obviously, right? Like the main reason for a pilot, or the main goal of a pilot, rather, is to hook you and make you want to watch more episodes, make you want to check out the rest of the series. And so to me, I thought this was kind of weaker, though, again, with this pilot episode. The hook, it's a long one, right? Like, even if you want to call it like a cold open, right? So basically the time that we fade in to the point where we fade out and the credits play, basically, you want a cold open or teaser, whatever you want to call it, in TV there. It's a long one. I think it's almost 10 minutes in this pilot episode, to where basically the explosion, right? And he gets out and all the red hats, they call them, right? Another great, use of their own language that they developed. They call the collaborators the red hats. And so the red hats kind of circle him, and he's got his hands up, and he's been basically caught for what has happened and what he was trying to do, get across the wall undetected. And so that's kind of, the end of the teaser or the cold open. And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of an interesting twist, that it looks like he's going to get through, and then this explosion happens out of nowhere, and it kind of grabs your attention for sure. But if you want to talk about just the opening minutes, I mean, again, we're kind of slowly introduced to this world, and so it doesn't really catch you, I wouldn't say, the same way that, again, I think Breaking Bad is one of the best, if not the best pilot I've ever seen, at least, with the hook being so brilliant, catching you immediately. Even something like White Collar, I've done that pilot as well, Justified. Like, there's so many great examples of shows just within the first 2 or 3 minutes that hook you immediately and immerse you in a situation, and you want to find out what happens next, right? This one doesn't do that. It very much is kind of this slow burn, basically, until this explosion happens about 10 minutes in. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess you could say it kind of hooks you on the slow kind of burn into what this world is, and you're kind of curious about it. Sure, but it does take a few minutes to really get into it and even start revealing stuff about the world, which again, I think it's a positive. I like that they did that. But in terms of a hook, to really hook you early on, I'm just not sure that it's as strong, right? As if they, started off the episode in maybe a slightly different way. Maybe you started off actually without the beginning bit and just the part on, a really, I think it's kind of cliche now, but kind of a trope, but it's, and Breaking Bad did it brilliantly, but it's basically, you show a situation, cold open, credits roll, and then you come back and you say 1 day earlier or 1 week earlier, right? And we see how we got to that point. Something like that may have worked better here. We see the scene where the explosion happens, and then maybe we, come back a little bit, one day earlier or whatever. So that would have been a better hook in this case. But like I say, that's kind of a trope at this point, so maybe it's better that they avoided that too. But anyway, so that's my thoughts on the beginning of this episode. Yeah, the explosion scene does get your attention, but even at that point, I'm not sure that you're really, really hooked to see what happens next to our main character, Will, at that point. It's kind of self-explanatory what's going to happen to him. He's going to get captured, put in jail, and that's kind of where we go. Now, if you want to talk about the twist, I would say that's basically the point where he's captured, he's in this prison, basically, or in this holding cell, and they take him out and they don't kill him, or they don't send him to the factory, as they call it, in this world. Instead, they offer him a job and offer him, to join the collaborators, basically, because of his past experience. So that's kind of the twist, and that is interesting. But that does happen, well into the episode. Probably 2/3 into the episode that we get that moment. And so, yeah, I don't know. Yes, that is an interesting twist. It is cool to then see him being on the collaborators. And then the other big twist is the very end of the episode when we find out that, Katie, Sarah Wayne Kelly's character, is a part of the resistance, right? And so now she's going to feed them information that her husband now is going to tell her. And so she's going to be an inside man, basically, for the resistance. And we get the idea that Will does not know that she is in the resistance at this point. So it does set up, like I said, an interesting foil for those two characters. One that's going to be a collaborator, and one that's very much embroiled in the resistance movement, and they got to live together, right? They're husband and wife, and they don't know about each other. So obviously, that's an interesting twist, and I think that is a really effective twist, at the end of the episode. Though I wasn't shocked by the fact that she was in the resistance. I think throughout the episode we kind of get teases that obviously she does not like the collaborators, and she does take quite a few risks in the episode, like going out for the curfew, right? She basically takes her life in her hands there with going out so close to curfew and almost gets caught. So we see her taking risks in that normal citizens wouldn't. And so it wasn't a huge surprise that she was in the resistance there at the end of the episode. But again, it sets up this really interesting foil. Now, I will say, though, to me, it's a good twist. It's an effective twist. But it's not the type of twist or hook that something like, Darren and I talked about with the 100. Like, that scene at the end of the episode immediately makes you want to click to the next one to see what happened. Like, what just happened to this main character that it looks like just died. And the whole premise or the whole situation of that scene is completely flipped in a matter of seconds, right? And so you want to watch the very next episode. And, for the 100, I think I did, right? I binge watched, the first season, so I probably 10 seconds later clicked on the next one, and I really got hooked into it. This show doesn't have that, I wouldn't say, at the end of this pilot. It does set up a very interesting premise, but it's not to the point where, okay, I need to see the next episode to see where this scene goes or what happens next. It's not quite that, right? And this, again, I'm going to talk about other pilots, but White Collar had a very similar thing to this, where it does set up a very interesting twist, where it kind of sets up a new premise to the show at the very end of the episode, but it's not a scene, again, where you want to immediately click next and see what is going to happen next. It's like a cliffhanger, right? It's not the same type of thing. And so, I guess you could go either way, but to me, it's not as strong. It's not as strong as those cliffhangers that really make you want to watch the next one. And in the case of something like Breaking Bad, because it has that hook at the beginning, you're already hooked and probably into the show at that point. But because this one doesn't have that hook at the beginning, and it's also missing the cliffhanger, to me, I'm going to have to kind of criticize at least this element of the pilot and say that the hook or the twist in this one is definitely not as effective as some other pilots I've looked at for sure up to this point. So Then, lastly, talk about the originality or uniqueness of this pilot episode and kind of where it sets up the show in terms of the genre that it's in and also the time of when it came out and all that stuff, right? Does it stand out? Does it make me want to watch the show, long term and really be interested in it? So I do have to, I have to say, I'm really impressed that this is an original idea from Condell and Cuse. Right? It really does feel like this is based off a book or some existing thing, and it's not. It's not an adaptation. So I think that deserves a lot of credit, especially with these sci-fi shows. Something like The 100 comes to mind based off a book. I don't know. Do you want to maybe throw Game of Thrones in there? I mean, it's fantasy and that kind of world. It's obviously based on a book. To me, I don't know, something like this where it's kind of high concept sci-fi, or maybe I guess you wouldn't go on high concept, but it's definitely sci-fi and, there's quite a bit of effects used and that kind of stuff. Usually these are adaptations, usually something like, somebody like USA Network, wouldn't take a big chance on something like this that's an original idea. So I think in that way it does stand out definitely, and it's a really intriguing idea. And something else that I really have to compliment the show on, which I have heard though, when I remember seeing Colony at the time, I do remember some people saying like, when are we going to see the aliens, right? Like, what about the aliens here? So I do remember hearing like little chatter about that, and I'm not sure if we eventually do see the aliens. Again, have not watched the show beyond this pilot, so I'm not sure. But to me, I kind of liked the fact that, yes, this is very much a sci-fi show. It's about an alien invasion, basically. But I think it's making it very clear just in this pilot episode that that's kind of secondary. Like, the main focus of the show is actually pretty much the moral question of collaborating and resisting, right? Going along with this because it benefits me, but is it really the right thing to do, right? Is it moral to help the aliens and, punish and, occupy and do all these things to my fellow humans, my fellow race, right? Is it the right thing to do? Even though, yeah, obviously the ones who are collaborating are benefiting richly, as we see, they get access to coffee and all these resources that the regular people don't get. And so it's kind of this tiered, society, right? It becomes. And then the resistance, right? Is that the morally right thing to do? We get, a bomb going off and killing people in this episode. And so, it has that question, right? Of whether it's, worth the cost of life, right? Killing some, people, including some innocent people, to make a difference, to have an impact and really fight back. So, and I think that is the core of the show. It's very much like framed basically as this sci-fi alien invasion. But again, maybe I'm speaking too early, but to me, in this pilot episode, the core of the show is really not about the aliens. It's really about kind of the political, and the societal kind of effects of what this invasion has caused, and this kind of rift between the collaborators and the resistance. And then also, of course, the normal citizens that are just stuck in the middle of it as well. They're being oppressed and occupied. So that I think they deserve some credit, instead of just going like, mystery box sci-fi, something like maybe going in the direction of Lost, right? At least in this pilot episode, they're kind of steering away from that. And so I think obviously that turned some people off from what I heard, people wanted to see the aliens. But I think this is more of a fascinating look, actually, to take this approach rather than something that's a little more cliche with just showing, aliens invading, right? We've seen that a lot. We've seen a lot of movies, a lot of, stuff, media about that, but not so much this. And, I was reading a little bit about it, that Condell and Cuse, we're basing this also off of, the Nazi occupation of France, right? Something like that. Even like anything really, where there's, an authoritarian government or an occupation. You get Iraq, right? Afghanistan, right? It's, any of these kind of, situations where we see, I think you can draw a lot of comparisons just in this pilot episode of, the resistance, the collaborators, and this moral question of, basically being on either side, which side is right, even like terrorist acts of resistance, which we definitely saw, in the Middle East with that, Nazi occupation, a lot of Europe, right, in not just France. So yeah, I think it's an interesting, thing to explore with this, with kind of the backdrop of the alien invasion in there. So to me, I think it definitely stands out in that way, being able to approach it like that. Again, maybe that's a negative to some people, but I think it makes it pretty damn original. So I got to give them a lot of credit for that. So having said all that, those are all my kind of thoughts in terms of an analysis of this pilot episode, looking at those criteria there. So now just at the end, I just want to kind of comment on just my general thoughts on the episode of the writing, directing, and that. The directing I was kind of disappointed with, to be honest. To me, I don't even know if there was one shot in this pilot that kind of made me step back and say, oh, look, that was cool, or, that was interesting. It just felt very kind of paint by the numbers, to me at least. In terms of pilots, there was nothing that really stood out to me that much about the directing here. Though, again, some of the shots looked, good with the effects, right? The wall shots and that. But I thought, it just kind of felt a little tame to me with the direction in this one, which is fine, if that's the approach they wanted to take. And I thought the writing was okay as well. I will say I thought the pacing was pretty good for this pilot episode, though maybe the beginning, like I said, could have been a little faster paced to get us into things. So, and the acting, of course, I thought Josh Holloway was okay. Sarah Lynn Callies was pretty strong in this one. And Peter Jacobson, good in that role. So, yeah, a few good performances here and there, but nothing that really blew me away just in terms of the overall pilot here. So, with all that being said, let's give a rating out of 10. I'm going to give this one a 7.25 out of 10. So this is actually the same rating as Fringe. As that pilot. I think I'm going to take this over Fringe, though, even though it's the same rating. I think I'm going to take this one over Fringe and just slightly below Suits, or maybe on the same level of Suits. I think I gave Suits a 7.5, so maybe just below it, but very close to the Suits pilot here when I think back of looking at that one. I had similar complaints about the hook and that kind of stuff in that pilot. So, so kind of at the lower end of the pilots that I've checked out so far for sure. But, again, still a lot of good stuff that came out of this one. Not a bad pilot by any means. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'll, check out more episodes of this one. I think to be fair, really kind of missed it, especially it's been canceled now, so the motivation just isn't there as much to watch it all the way through, knowing that maybe there's a big cliffhanger at the end that they didn't tie up, right, of course, but it's really unfortunate I missed this, because I know if I had seen it in 2016 and 2017, I would have loved this type of show, and so it's just unfortunate that I missed it, but anyways, it is what it is. Really had a good time, though, looking at this pilot and checking it out for the first time, finally, after all these years. So anyways, like I said off the top, love to hear your guys' thoughts on this pilot episode and the series as a whole with Colony here. But yeah, so that'll just about do it. So stay tuned for the next review in this series. It will or should be Game of Thrones. We're going to take a look at the pilot. For that one, of course, with House of the Dragon coming out, I think it's a great time to look back on that. So stay tuned for that if you're interested. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this one, and we'll see you then in my next review.
This big house that you